All right, table's cleared. Let's just talk about taste, flavor, and aroma. Do you know the difference? Do you know what's the difference between taste and flavor is? Do you know what aroma is? Probably. You probably know what aroma is, and you might know the difference between taste and flavor is, and why it's valuable to differentiate them. Let's talk about it. These are going to be really valuable to parse out because it's going to allow us to taste differences in our coffees, to experience what's going on differently between the aroma, the things that we're tasting, the things that are in the flavor of the coffee. We're going to be able to differentiate what we'd prefer to have on espresso or on pour over or on drip coffee or whatever it may be, cold brew, you name it. Based off of these differences, we're going to have a better ability to discern what is right and what's not, what is good, what's bitter, what's sour, what's going on, and move forward from there. So whether it's picking the coffees for different brewing methods or it's improving a coffee and making sure it's brewed well, understanding these things and honing them in is going to be super tremendously helpful. So what is aroma? This is the simplest one in this scenario. Aroma, we're just going to describe it as what you smell. Seriously, we just want to talk about, when we talk about aroma, talking about what are the smells I'm getting and how would I describe them. So for example, you might smell coffee when it's first ground. When the bag's first open, you might smell a coffee when it's first ground up. You might smell a coffee again after it's finished brewing. You might smell it again somewhere in the middle. At the end of the day, probably the most important step in that process is when the customer's receiving a cup of coffee, they're gonna smell that cup of coffee as it goes to their mouth to drink. The smell of a coffee, the aroma, is super important. So when I say aroma, I simply mean, does this coffee smell like a classic cup of red can grandpa's coffee? Or does this cup smell something like a lot more fruity? Does this one remind me of strawberries? It may not smell exactly like strawberries, but is this one more like strawberries than this one? Or is this more like chocolate than fruit? You know, and it's kind of differentiating there. What am I smelling? Does it smell smooth and sweet? Does it smell citrusy or fruity? Does it smell chocolatey? Does it smell really dark, really bitter? That kind of thing. Aroma is just important to consider. And aroma is actually going to be very closely tied in this situation to flavor. Flavor is the descriptions that you would give to your coffee. There's a great example of flavor that the SCAA and other organizations have put out called the flavor wheel. There's variations of the flavor wheel. We'll attach them. Any flavor wheel, whether the SCAA flavor wheel or another one, is going to help guide you to define what you're tasting in your cup. What flavors are in this cup of coffee? One might be more floral and might be more chocolatey. And at different points of the flavor wheel, you're gonna find those descriptors that are gonna help you hone in further and further out, the further you go out of the wheel, to really hone in what you're tasting in your cup of coffee. This can be incredibly valuable. We use this flavor wheel, we use different flavor wheels. We also just use our own experiences all the time. Let's say that we're looking to make a good coffee for espresso. Whenever we're looking for an espresso bean, there are a couple things we're looking for. If we're looking to do a single origin espresso or some sort of one-off really flavorful coffee that is primarily going to be drank as an espresso shot or maybe in a small cappuccino, maybe an Americano, something that's going to be tasted for the coffee's flavor and what it can offer, we might look for something really floral, like a coffee with strawberry notes in it. Flavor is related to the notes that you put on bags. It's just the notes that you'll see on the bags that we give you are just the flavors that we detected. So you might put a strawberry forward coffee in with the espresso for that. That's gonna be great. But as soon as you start using a light roasted, modern roasted strawberry forward coffee, that's super awesome and super delicious, and you start putting that in larger lattes, that flavor might very quickly disappear. So then you start to ask the question, okay, so this is good for some tastings, for some high level experiences, for sitting with and sipping on, but you might come to a point of realizing the best-selling drink on my menu is a latte. Maybe it's a caramel latte, or maybe you have some signature house latte. And that strawberry, really fruity, light coffee just doesn't cut it for my lattes. It doesn't show up in the drink. That's where we put in the work on our end to design things like our Spro Blend. Spro for us is our short term for espresso. And we just use it because it's fun. But this blend is especially designed for the coffee shop that needs a blend that's gonna hold up in their lattes and please the crowds. So it's got a few different coffees in it. It's got a Brazil that brings a rich chocolatiness to the drink that complements milk super, super well and pairs really well with syrups of different, or just different flavors that you might add to your coffee. It really shows up in the drink and adds a lot of really pairable flavor to your drink. But the Brazil alone is not quite enough for what we're going for. A single bean like that can be kind of hollow and still not show up well in your drink. So in the Spro blend, we also add an El Salvadoran bean, which can change depending on the season. But for the most part, we're using a bean from El Salvador and we're using a bean from Ethiopia. And we're putting Brazil, El Salvador, and Ethiopia together and making the blend. The Brazil brings the chocolatiness. The specific Ethiopia we use brings a certain sweetness. It's a floral sweetness. It's very light, but it shows up really well in the drink and just complements the overall complexity of the cup. And then the El Salvador is roasted a little bit darker than the others. Not dark by any means, it's more of a medium roast if you were gonna use that kind of scale, but it brings a very traditional flavor. The bean itself has a natural smokiness. So whenever you combine the chocolatiness of the Brazil, the fruit floralness of the Ethiopia, and the smokiness and the slight acidity of the El Salvador, you get this complex blend that is perfect for espressos, for lattes, for milk-based drinks, for cafe serving across the board. Because it's really good on its own as an espresso shot and can be drank that way, but is also still going to show up in your milk whenever you're making a latte. Now that's an exact example of how these flavors can make a difference. We're thinking about these flavors that El Salvador tastes like tobacco and it tastes like smoke a little bit, and that Brazil tastes like chocolate, and that Ethiopia tastes like hibiscus. And when you put them together, it makes a really well-balanced espresso drink. But you also don't always have to get that complex with it. It can simply be, okay, the crowd that comes into our shop most often really likes a traditional cup of coffee. They like stuff that has that nuttiness to it, that has that chocolatiness to it. So I'm considering a blend for drip coffee. I might choose the Colombia that Joe has, that has some really nutty notes, that has notes of pecan, but also has a hint of lime to it. Or I might choose the Brazil because it is super chocolatey and super nutty. Or the crowd that you have might really like that modern third wave coffee. I want that fruity Ethiopia Guji, the best thing you've got. Yeah, like your crowd might be all into that. And that's super awesome. Pay attention to what the people that come into your shop like and work with them. If they like really fruity coffees, order some Ethiopia, order something from Colombia that's like a light roasted modern coffee. Order our Mexico, try something like that. Go try new things, experiment. The reason I say Ethiopia so many times is that Ethiopia is kind of a standard example of just a fruity or floral coffee. Every Ethiopian coffee bean is different, but across the board, it's an easy example to say this is a fruity coffee. So that's why I keep using that so much. So if your crowd is looking for something fruitier, throw that on. If they want something more traditional, throw something else on. Knowing the flavors that you're tasting and knowing what you think about your coffee is gonna be super beneficial. And at the end of the day, no one knows your customers as well as you do. We don't. We can give you the coffees, we can tell you what they're like, but it's gonna take some discernment on your end and on your staff's end to say, the people around here like this, let's lean this way. Our job is to come alongside you and offer you beans that you can utilize to support what you're going for. So that's flavor. Flavor is simply saying, I taste strawberry, I taste blueberry, I taste chocolate, milk chocolate, I taste 52% dark chocolate. It can get as fine as you want it to get or as broad as you want it to get. We tend to use the categories of fruits, florals, and chocolates. Those are super helpful for us. But it's up to you. You can use your own language or you can use something off of a flavor wheel. So that's flavor. But it begs the question, what's different between flavor and taste? Why are those two separated? I use them interchangeably. I've probably used them interchangeably in this video. And that's because they do work hand in hand. But for the sake of understanding, taste is a tactile experience. What I mean by tactile is that taste is felt. Taste is typically described as having 5 categories. See if you can name them with me. You've got sweets or sugars. You've got your salts. You've got your bitterness. You've got your sours. And then, do you know the fifth one? Umami. 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 So you've got your sours or your acids, your sugars or sweets, your bitters, your salts, and umami. Acids would be related to tastes of lemon. Whenever you put lemon on your tongue, you don't just taste a lemon flavor, you experience the sourness. Your mouth puckers, your face goes like this. You feel it in your jaw. It's a tactile experience. That's taste. You're tasting acidity. Whenever you have sugar, it feels smooth in your mouth. It lights you up. When you have bitterness, it goes down the back of your throat, kind of harsh, kind of dry. Whenever you have salts, we're probably familiar with that flavor. Whenever you have umami, which can often be the hardest to describe, it's helpful to think of something like meat, like a salami or maybe even a cherry tomato. Sometimes it's described as being on the center of your tongue. It's kind of that savory taste, somewhere between salty and bitter. It's not bitter, it's not quite salty, it's savory. That would be umami. The reason that we separate taste and flavor is not just to add more words to our dictionary, to just get more and more deep into this. There is really a lot of practicality to separating them. So let's dive into that. Now that we know that aroma is the things we smell, and flavor is defining the things that we, with our tactile taste, are experiencing, the names, the notes that we're experiencing, flavor can be utilized really well to help us understand what's going on in the extraction of our cup. So let's take flavor, let's take those 5 pieces of flavor and move on to extraction.